Beside me is the latest generation of the quintessential trail mountain bike, perhaps a bike that really sets the standards for what a trail or mountain bike can look like in the modern age. This is a Specialized Stumpjumper 15. Stay tuned to learn all about it and find out how it's performed in this long-term review on loamwolf.com. Let's go. For the latest Stumpjumper, Specialized didn't go completely crazy in making some, super long slacked out machine. They kept things fairly sensible, but just focused on refining it and adding some performance in other areas to really elevate not only the maximum performance that you can get out of it, but also the adaptability and general well-roundedness. Taking a look at the frame, you'll notice that they've done away with the cross brace that was in the frame. This allows them to make it slightly easier to get a bottle in and out and just simplifies the overall construction a little bit. But Specialized was able to work on the carbon fiber or aluminium kind of constructions to retain the same strength and stiffness without adding a bunch of weight. It now features a 145mm rear end. The kinematics aren't wildly different to the previous model, but many of the new Stumpjumper 15s come with the Fox Genie shock. This is a Specialized and Fox partnership where they implemented some new technology, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and they did a fantastic job with that. There's no longer the separation of a Stumpjumper and a Stumpjumper Evo. Instead, there's a couple of different build specs offered with a coil-sprung mixed wheel model on offer, but also there's a huge amount of adjustability built in so that you can essentially take the standard Stumpjumper and turn it into an Evo and back without having to swap any components. As standard, it's paired with a 150mm fork up front, apart from on the smallest S1 size, which gets a 140mm fork to fit smaller riders better. And as standard, the sizes S1 and S2 come with a mixed wheel setup with a smaller rear wheel, whereas the S3 and above come with a dual 29er. The frame sizing goes all the way from S1 to S6, with obviously 6 different frame sizes, which cater to a huge range of rider sizes, which is really nice to see. And because all the seat tube lengths are nice and low, riders are really able to choose the frame based on the reach and the overall cockpit kind of feel, rather than just on the seat tube height, meaning that riders can either size up or size down to get the appropriate trail feel that they desire. If you're looking to run a mixed wheel configuration on some of the larger sizes, then Specialized does offer a mullet link separately, so you can make that switch and retain all of the geometry and kinematics Specialized intended. And also that Öhlins coil spec that I mentioned earlier does come as standard with a mixed wheel setup if that's your kind of thing. For the new Stumpjumper 15, Specialized added in a ton of adjustability to the geometry, meaning that riders are really able to tune the handling of the bike to the terrain on the menu for the day ahead. So you've got an adjustable headset cup, which lets you go plus or minus 1 degree of the nominal 64.5 degree head tube angle. And then down on the horse pivot, you've got an adjustment chip, which lets you choose between a high and a low bottom bracket setting, which also tweaks the chainstay length a little bit to affect the overall handling. Whether you get the high-spec Fact 11M carbon frame or one of the cheaper aluminium-framed models, Specialized covers all the details really well, as you would expect from their typical premium nature. So you've got well-guided internal cable routing, you've got a little protector on the rear suspension pivot to help keep rocks and stones from being trapped in there and causing damage. There's a SRAM universal derailleur hanger, fairly durable chainstay protection, and a nice long down tube protector to not only protect from damage but also to keep noise to a minimum. And then of course you've got Specialized swap box in that down tube, which is a removable cover that lets you store items in the down tube and is really neatly executed, as you'd expect from Specialized, who's been doing this for quite a while now. Many users will appreciate seeing a threaded bottom bracket fitted to the frame, which just helps to reduce the likelihood of creaking from occurring. And then Specialized backs their frames up with a lifetime frame warranty, lifetime carbon Roval wheel warranty, and also lifetime pivot bearing replacement free of charge, helping to keep you rolling for the long term. As I mentioned, the new Stumpjumper 15 has 145mm of rear travel and then either a 140 or a 150mm fork, depending on the size that you go for. But the party piece isn't a high pivot design, it's nothing super fancy with a 6-bar linkage. It's a standard horse link setup, which means that you're able to run just about any shock that you want on this. But I think Specialized will be keen that you try, and I'd highly recommend it too, the new Genie technology on the Fox and Specialized co-developed float shock here. The Genie tech is an air spring that is essentially a two-stage design. So from 0 to 70% of the travel, you get an air spring that's got a very high volume, and that high volume air spring is considered to give you better bump handling abilities because it doesn't have the same pronounced ramp up that a smaller volume air shock will give. But to offset the issues that you would likely find at the end of the travel with that very high volume air spring, they have this Genie tech, which is a sliding band that once you get up to that 70% or so portion of the travel, it starts to close off the larger air chamber, giving you a smaller air chamber for that final 30% of the travel, which of course is then going to give you a more pronounced ramp up towards bottom out and just help to keep you off the bottom out bumper. I won't give away too much just now, but it's safe to say that Genie tech is quite impressive and does work exactly how Specialized intended. But if you're not necessarily looking for an ultra plush and supple off the top machine, and you'd instead rather have a slightly more conventional, slightly more efficient and supportive, say, feeling, then Specialized is giving you the opportunity to add volume reducers to that outer larger air volume in the chamber. So you can go from 0 to 4 spacers in there, with each of them just slightly reducing the overall large air volume and giving you a slightly more conventional air spring feel. And yeah, the difference between 0, which is super supple, and then 4, which definitely feels more, if not even more than normal, kind of supportive and overall, I guess, slightly old school in a way, but more efficient and supportive earlier in the travel. You can really just tune the air spring characteristics of this to really transform the overall nature of the bike. This Genie float factory shock that we've got here on this build gives you the same adjustments that you would have on a standard float factory shock. So that is a lockout lever, a 3-position compression dial, and then a low speed rebound adjustment. For the geometry, Specialized didn't do anything crazy with the new Stumpjumper 15. It's very similar, just with a few refinements here and there compared to the outgoing Stumpjumper. So you get a 64.5 degree nominal head tube angle, but of course that can go down to 63.5 or up to 65.5 degrees with the adjustable head tube cup. You get a 76.5 degree or so effective seat tube angle. The chainstays are size specific, going from 430 millimeters on the S1 up to 445 millimeters on the S6, progressively in small steps. And then the S4 that we tested here has a 475 millimeter reach and a 640 millimeter stack height. Specialized offers the Stumpjumper 15 in a wide range of builds, from the comp alloy at $4,500 all the way up to the limited edition build at $13,500 with the Fox Neo. We tested the $9,000 Stumpjumper 15 Pro build, which comes with all of the kind of flashy stuff that you would want without being excessively expensive. Don't get me wrong, $9,000 is by no means a small amount of money, but certainly this is a spec level that I don't think anyone's going to have any complaints with at all, and it's proved to be quite a treat to ride out on the trails. Head to the website in the description below, or to the Specialized website if you want to learn a little bit more about the specs. Instead, for this video, we're going to concentrate on the most important thing: how does the new Specialized Stumpjumper 15 Pro perform out on the trails? So after attending the launch camp for the new Specialized Stumpjumper 15 in Canada earlier in the year, I was left with some incredibly positive first impressions. And then when I took it back home and took it for its first couple of rides initially, these impressions continued to last. And some people were actually calling me out in that original video for being overly positive and just giving in to Specialized marketing hype. So I decided, instead of me just, not changing my opinion, I'd give it to another tester, an independent tester who, doesn't actually work for us, but is certainly a trusted guy who puts in a lot of miles on his bikes and is not afraid to hold back on his positive and negative impressions. So I had him put almost 500 miles in on the Stumpjumper 15 to really get to the bottom of its performance, to test it on some properly gnarly, not necessarily trail bike terrain in the northeast of Scotland. And he came away pretty damn impressed as well, much to my relief, I guess. I don't want to just sing the praises of bikes by any means. That is not my job. But when I can give it to another rider and just say, off you go, see how you get on with it, and he comes back with the same kind of positive impressions, it at least reassures me that I have got the right kind of idea of the performance of the bike. And in the case of the Stumpjumper 15, we have both been incredibly impressed. So Callum is on the slightly smaller end of the spectrum for the size 4 at 178 centimeters or 5'10", whereas at 6'2" or 189 centimeters. I'm certainly on the very upper limit, and Specialized would likely recommend that I go for an S5. However, both of us found the Stumpjumper 15 in the size S4 was a very comfortable fit. He's also on the slightly lower end of the weight scale at 75 kilos, where I'm 100 kilos or 220 pounds. And both of us were able to get that Fox Float Genie shock set up in a comfortable position with around about 30% sag, seeming to be the ultimate kind of setup for the Specialized Stumpjumper 15's rear end. I really liked the feeling of the shock with 0 or 1 Genie bands in that larger air chamber fitted, whereas Callum settled on 1 or 2 as being his preference. Certainly with 0 or 1 spacers fitted to that Genie air shock, you're given a very supple off the top initial kind of stroke, and it really does feel like it uses a travel more like a coil shock than an air shock. Whereas once you start getting to the kind of 2 spacer realm, it feels more like a conventional sort of shock, and then you go to 3 and 4 and it just starts to get more kind of efficient and firm feeling off the top, if that's the kind of feeling that you're desiring. I really like the Specialized and Fox have worked together to give you that tuning potential. You know, it takes 5 minutes for you to drastically change the feeling of that rear end. I mean, if you go to a ride and you've got half a day where you're on super chunky stuff that you just want it to be super comfortable, and then half a day where you're on more trail center stuff where you want a little bit more support, you could, in theory, take those Genie bands with you and make that switch at lunch very quickly on the side of the trail, and yeah, completely transform the feeling of the bike. And I do really think that's a super cool possibility. And for riders who don't want to be fussing around, you can find your setup that works for you. You know, if you're after ultimate suppleness, 0 spacers is probably going to do the job. If you're looking for a nice firm and efficient feel or a balanced feel, then maybe 2 or 3. And yeah, I really like what Specialized have done with that shock. Of course, the initial stroke feeling is one thing, but if you have a super supple stroke earlier in the travel and not an ultra progressive linkage, then typically you run into the issues with hitting the bottom of the travel a lot. Whereas because of that Genie tech, this rear shock doesn't let you just absolutely slam into the end of the travel. And it's amazing that for its 145mm rear end, you can really push this bike hard, you know, gas into flat, and it's not going to give you that really harsh feeling through your feet. Oh, hello. Hi. Both of us found that to get the same balance of bottom out resistance and initial stroke sensitivity on the fork as in the rear end, you need to add another volume reducer compared to normal. So for me, that was 2 volume reducers. Callum settled on the same in that Fox 36 factory fork, which just, yeah, keeps you off the bottom out bumper in the front too. And it'd be really interesting, I think, Specialized did originally talk about implementing that Genie tech to a fork in the future as well. And I think that'll be really interesting just to see how that performs and if you can get a really good match between both ends to, you know, yield the same kind of benefits as if you were to have perhaps even a coil sprung fork in the front of the bike. In terms of the geometry tuning potential, both of us found that the stock 64.5 degree head tube angle provided a really nice balance, and we both also preferred the lower setting, which just gives you a slightly longer chainstay length and a lower BB, giving you a really nice in the bike feeling, but also feeling a little bit more centered in between the wheels. Of course, if you're looking for a more playful ride, having that high and shorter rear end setting on that chainstay horse pivot link is going to be really nice. Just quickly change the handling characteristics of the bike there too. And yeah, it's safe to say Specialized is doing a really good job at making highly adaptable bikes. Of course, you can even take this thing from the 29er setup that we've got it into a mullet with that optional link that you can buy aftermarket as well. So yeah, you can really have the Stumpjumper, maybe even have a spare rear wheel with a burlier tire on it. So you've got a mullet setup for burlier days and then a 29er for, you know, slightly more mile munching rides. And yeah, this is a highly adaptable bike, and I think their decision to slightly reduce the range overall and do away with the Evo is quite a good one, because they've given this Stumpjumper 15, especially in this Pro build, a really sensible and aggressive build spec where it matters. So you've got barely Maven brakes, you've got a durable wheel set, and yeah, I just don't think you necessarily need the Evo because they've made the new Stumpjumper 15 so capable in its stock spec. Climbing this bike, and it's certainly not an ultra efficient pedaler, there's no doubt about that. It's definitely a bike that errs more towards the comfortable side. You're well kind of centered in the bike, and you have a fairly nice upright seated position, so it's not a bike that you feel like you're really just hanging off the back of and struggling, and it doesn't feel ultra heavy as a result. But yeah, certainly if you're looking for a super efficient pedaler, you'll either want to stick a bunch of the reducers in that Genie shock just to give it a little bit more support through that way, or you're going to want to make use of the easily accessible lockout lever on that Fox float shock. That said, it's by no means a total slouch on the climbs. It's just a bike that errs slightly towards the more comfortable side of things, which means that you can pedal through rough and technical terrain that little bit easier, albeit with that fairly low bottom bracket, occasionally making it quite difficult to maintain crank clearance in technical terrain. On the way down the hill, and really this Stumpjumper 15 can be a whole number of different bikes in one. And when you're looking at a trail all mountain bike, a bike that can be adaptable is going to be really useful, because one day you'll be in a trail center riding a fairly mellow descents. Another day you might even be trying to ride some super gnarly enduro tracks. And the Stumpjumper 15 really provides in that aspect a bike that you can, with a few spec changes as well, really take from a lightweight pedal friendly bike all the way through to a light enduro bike. And this is certainly a bike that you can understand why Charlie Murray has been racing on the enduro world circuit, because it is a bike that really, once you start to hammer on it, it is a bike that impresses and really delivers on its descending performance and confidence. Of course, if you look at the stock spec, you don't get that Assegai rear tire, you get a trail casing specialized eliminator instead. And there's definitely a couple of things that we'd like to change personally. Number one, being those tires, we'd like to see slightly more durable casings, maybe slightly more aggressive tread patterns even, for our personal preferences. And then the Maven brakes on this bike, as with some of the other bikes that we've tested, haven't proved to be fantastic. They're certainly powerful. They deliver that power with a limited need to really grab onto them for dear life. But the initial force needed to pull that lever is notable, and definitely can provide some fatigue on longer descents when you're trying to just make small lever inputs rather than hard braking efforts. So for us, yeah, the jury is definitely out. For me, I actually quite like them, but Callum didn't love them, and certainly some of the rest of the team don't love them either. So do be prepared to potentially factor in a brake replacement at some point if you find that these don't work for you as well. Other than that though, on this Pro build, we've certainly been very happy with the build spec selected. Once we changed out those tires, the capabilities of this bike just got so high, and for a 145mm travel rear end with that Genie tech, you really do feel like you have more and you can push it that little bit harder. The overall geometry compromises that Specialized have made sit you in a nice place. It's not going to be the most stable bike in the world, even when you've got it slacked out and in the low setting, but it still definitely provides plenty of stability to let you charge up until things really start to demand a full-on enduro bike. And it's just absolutely dialed as well. Specialized really cover the details well. There's minimal rattles, everything is well protected, and it's easy to work on. Didn't prove to need much maintenance at all, and it's just an absolute delight. And it's certainly a product that you can expect that you would spend that money on, and you're going to be backed for life. You're going to probably have minimal issues, and it's just a bike that you look at and you think that is a serious quality machine. One thing that is very interesting on this Stumpjumper 15 in the Pro build is the paint finish. It's got like a clear coat in a speckled sort of finish with a matte base layer and then some gloss clear coat on the top of it. What that means is that with clear protection tape, it ends up being bubbles because it's a kind of 3D paint finish. So that's not something that we love, and certainly if you are somebody who likes to run clear protection tape on their frames, as you should rightly, it is potentially something that's going to show up some weird marks and let water and dirt in underneath in the long run. But certainly otherwise, Specialized has covered the details very well, and this is an incredibly high quality machine that you'd be proud to own. Overall, the Specialized Stumpjumper 15 has certainly hit the mark when it comes to an all-rounder trail mountain bike, and I reckon Specialized has really continued to up the game in terms of what a true all-rounder bike can look like, and this is certainly as close as it comes to getting into a quiver-killing bike, as much as I hate to say it. One bike that you could take from a light trail center ride to a full-on enduro race and really be happy regardless of the terrain that you're facing. So props to Specialized for doing a killer job on this machine, and thank you very much to them for letting us have it for such a long-term test. If you've enjoyed this video, then do give us a like, leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts. Do you think this is the best quiver killer, or do you have anything better in mind? Let us know, and let us know if you have any questions on it that we'd be happy to answer. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more awesome content on awesome bikes like Specialized Stumpjumper 15. Also, please do consider heading to our members only page where you can become a guest tester, you can join us on our shootouts, and many other little perks, and it helps to support us as we produce these videos on the industry's hottest bikes. So do hit the description below and check out that page there as well, if you don't mind. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you out on the trails.